everybody's scared that they're not enough, that they're faking it, that they are going to get found out. And I think like what's so refreshing for people is when they realize like their heroes felt this exact same way and move forward anyway. Welcome back to Case Studies. This is an interview that I've looked forward to doing for a long time. I'm really with two of my heroes, and it's fun for me to like be able to express it in person, you know, but I've been cheering for Pelion for a lot of years. I'm a personal LP and multiple funds. You know, the team that you guys have are like people that I just really look up to, the Chads and the, you know, Jeffs and Tyler and Sterling and Ben. You know, you guys have just exceptional people, and, you know, admire what you guys have built, and outside of that, just admire you guys as people. And so this one's really fun for me. But I want to do a quick introduction. So, Blake Modersitzki, Chris Cooper, co-founders of Pelion Ventures, that I think would be the most well-known for sure in kind of the regional area, but, you know, definitely in Utah. Longest, you know, track record. I think you guys just finished up fund number 8.
Yeah.
Which
8.
is so insane. Wow. Like, it's just like
crazy.
That's like dog years at this point. And so, this is starting at the end, but I want to go back to the beginning. So talk to me a little bit about kind of where it all began. Where was home growing up?
Well, for me, I grew up on a farm in southeastern Idaho. And my freshman year in college, my major was wildlife management. I actually thought being a game warden was like the coolest job ever. I ended up living in New York for a couple of years and got exposed to Wall Street. And I'm like, oh, hey, this business thing is actually pretty cool. But I still have this strong desire. I still go home a lot to the farm and hang out with my parents and drive tractors and all sorts of stuff. So that's where it started for me.
So grew up in Idaho, stayed in Idaho, came down to Utah. Like, where did it transition?
Yeah, so I graduated from high school and I went to a junior college up in Rexburg, Idaho, Ricks. Then came down to Utah, went to BYU, just had a phenomenal experience at BYU.
And studied what?
So I was an econ major. And it's an interesting journey on that front, only because I thought I was going to get a finance degree from BYU. That's what I wanted to do. My dad has open heart surgery. I have an older brother living in graduate school at Utah State, younger brother living in South Africa. Somebody's got to go home and run the family farm. So I quit school, I'm single, move home, end up getting engaged while I'm living at home. My now wife was living in Utah, came back down and started to apply for classes at BYU, and I couldn't get in. So I go over there and I'm like, what's going on? And they tell me, dude, you didn't apply for the business program at BYU. I didn't realize you had to apply for the undergrad program. That's how naive I was. So I had a buddy that said, hey, come take some econ classes with me. Did it, fell in love with econ, and got an econ degree from BYU.
Wow. So how do you get into finance from there? Like, how do you go from, because, you know, that's an entryway, but it's not the entryway. Like, I think there's more succinct tracks.
Yeah, you know, well, my wife had just started, when we got married, she just started with a company called WordPerfect. For those of you out there that don't know what WordPerfect was, it was the original word processor. In fact, that's where my business partner, Chris Cooper, and I first met in
91?
91, yeah. And so I went to work. My first job, I was a security guard for WordPerfect.
What?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I was going to school. My wife was working. I'm a security guard for WordPerfect. Ended up in their sales organization, had a great time, ended up in product management. And then had an opportunity because of a good friend who now is an investment banker to move into corporate development. And I was kind of intrigued by the whole M&A world.
At WordPerfect.
At WordPerfect.
Okay.
And right about that time is when WordPerfect was acquired by Novell. And so during that whole transition, it was a little bit dicey. Chris and I almost became unemployed because so many different moving parts. We survived that through a host of different events around guys like Ron Hines, who took a risk on us. Many of you might know Ron. He's just a fantastic person. And then there was a guy who came to Novell by the name of Eric Schmidt. And during that time, he wanted to start a corporate venture fund. I had been working in corporate development, and I'd been given an assignment to sell off. It was actually the linguistics division for Novell.
But give me kind of like a sense of time on this, because when 1991, I was in middle school.
That's just mean.
No, so I'm going through this and I'm like, people don't have context that this was like tech.
Yeah.
This was like, these were the companies. Like, so Novell, WordPerfect. This was it. This was like the front end of like.
Yeah, 89, you might have been in elementary school.
Born in 82. I don't even know if I was in elementary school yet.
God.
This is Shift F7 and P for print. Like, this is DOS, pre-GUI.
So the worst part about this is I'm the old guy now. It's I've always felt like the young guy, and 82 gets old now.
So 89, I'm living in Provo, working at WordPerfect. Roll forward, 91, I end up moving away, living in the sales organization for WordPerfect, lived in New York, lived in Seattle.
And they had a great sales program, right? That was that was what made them different. And honestly, that's kind of been in the ethos of Utah. Software companies, probably a lot of the companies you guys have invested in over the years, is like traditionally sales is a strength of Utah companies.
You know what's funny about that is that I think that what WordPerfect and Novell really were in the early days were disruptive technology that had product market fit and very little competition.
Yeah.
And so my first job in tech, along with Blake, we were sales reps for WordPerfect. And I think we thought we were pretty awesome. It actually was more that we were selling a product that was very differentiated, unique, didn't have a lot of competition. And I think that we learned kind of painfully over time that we really weren't that great at the selling part of it. But, you don't know until you know. So I think that it is also true that, that the go-to-market prowess and strength that we now are really highly regarded for, and deservedly so, came later.
We invested in a Bay Area company that has, is known for really good product and the only reason that they let us invest, it was an AKKR company. It was a secondary round, and literally the only reason that they let us invest is they said, we need to hire a CRO, and we're way better than these three companies in your market, but somehow they're like running laps around us. And we got to get like a person that can sell this, because we're better, but we're just engineers. And that, this is starting when you guys were there, but like your point of like product market fit matters, but there's cycles. Like we were talking about it before this thing got started. You guys just raising this last fund, you go hit 2022.
Yeah.
Markets turn on and they turn off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And there's some times where you just have to put your hard hat on and grind,
Well, it's so true. I mean, like if you think about the sales engine that exists here today, it's existed here for 30 years. Chris is right. Like we thought we were like the coolest guys on the planet because WordPerfect. Like I remember going to trade shows and you'd see the Microsoft reps and you kind of felt sorry for them.
They just didn't have it. And like our job was, we'd go to trade shows, we'd stand up on stage, we'd have like, it was a rock concert. We'd have hundreds of people in the audience. We were throwing M&Ms, peanut M&Ms, by the way, out in the audience. We're giving away spiffs or, swag. And we thought we were like the coolest thing ever because people were loving it.
They were just consuming the WordPerfect product like nobody's business.
Yeah.
But I think there was an element there that I should give some credit to. So we in the aftermath, once we realized, because I stayed with the company, I was working out in New England, in the Boston area, as a sales manager after Novell acquired WordPerfect, and I was slowly beginning to realize that we didn't know what we were doing. But so I used to refer to our sales force as ambassadors of goodwill. Like we actually didn't know how to like sign contracts, and like we didn't understand that element of sales. But there was something else, like, maybe we had knocked on some doors before. Maybe we had learned some fundamentals.
Yeah.
And what we didn't know how to do was that sort of last mile of selling, where you really need to close.
Kind of that enterprise, like longer term.
Oh, yeah. Like when Novell showed up and bought WordPerfect, like that became, because Novell was a true blue hardcore software sales organization. And all of a sudden we're thrown into the middle of that, and we're like, a quota? What's a quota?
You guys just realized there's another level.
There's another level.
Yeah.
What do you mean I have to fill out an expense report? That's just offensive.
Like it was the wildest time. And so, like from a time standpoint, I think it was like 1993 is when Novell acquired WordPerfect. And, Chris and I had kind of gone through the sales organization. I'd actually spent a time working in product management, and then had moved into corporate development. And Chris was still living on the East Coast, actually working in sales. And, kind of through this whole journey, Eric Schmidt decides he wants to create a $300 million corporate venture fund.
Which back then is like $300 million.
Massive.
Today's a lot of money. $300 million 30 years ago.
This was
a big number.
1996. Yeah. And it was $200 million to invest into venture farms as a limited partner, and $100 million to invest into companies. And I'd gotten to know.
So Novell was just printing money with a press.
Oh my gosh.
Like they were just stamping it.
They were stamping money left and right. And they had this huge war chest of cash that they had sitting in bonds. And so Eric's like, I'm going to take part of that and I'm going to invest it into innovation and technology. And by the way, I had no idea what I was doing. And Eric's like, I got this approval, but I need somebody to run day-to-day operations. Do you want to do that?
And hey, I also have no idea what I'm doing. We should get together. And like you put those two things together and it's going to go someplace.
But like just step back and look at like Eric Schmidt today.
Oh.
And I think that like to me is like one of the best lessons is like none of us know what we were doing. If Eric Schmidt didn't know what he was doing, who did? Like, like that's like the original gangster. Like you look at him now and you're like, this is the adult supervision for Google. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And when you think about Eric, so, Eric's peer group was Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer and Larry Ellison and Steve Jobs. Like that was the crew that Chris and I had the opportunity to kind of run around with. We just followed Eric around. And
kind of blows my mind.
It was crazy. Absolutely crazy. I remember we put $1 million into Red Hat alongside Greylock and Benchmark. And 18 months later, that company went public, and I get a phone call from the Novell finance group, and they're yelling at me on the phone. I'm like, why are you yelling at me? Because that $1 million had turned into $100 million, and the other income line at Novell was so big that the street, as a public company, didn't know how to deal with it. I'm like, wait a minute, we made $100 million and I'm getting in trouble? What's going on?
Where are those deals at?
I got to be honest with you. We did that and I'm like, yeah, this venture thing is easy. Man, were we wrong. When you think about that journey, like had Eric not taken a risk on us,
yeah, that's so special.
We wouldn't be sitting here. So I have a ton of like admiration. He literally one of the smartest guys on the planet. An interesting character all by himself.
What was it like? What was believing in you guys? You know what I mean? Like, what was that? Like, have you ever like had a chance to follow up with them and just say like, hey, why? Like, why did you pick me?
Our real on the ground mentor was a guy named Carl Ledbetter, who was our partner at Pelion for many, many years until 2018 when he retired.
And Carl and Eric went back to the Sun days.
Sun Microsystems days. They were both CTOs for Scott McNeely at Sun Microsystems. And when Eric took the job at Novell, he did it under the condition that he could bring Carl with him and that Carl could be the CTO of Novell.
Those guys were just thick as thieves.
Yeah. And both like goofy smart, which is actually the first thing that comes to mind when you ask the question, like, why you? What I can assure you about me, and I think Blake, is that we're not the sharpest knives in the drawer. No. I mean, honestly, I'm old enough to not be ashamed of it.
Yeah.
Because I've learned that there's a lot more to success than just, the size of your IQ. But for some reason, Carl kind of took to us. And of all of the people that I think I would have guessed that he would gravitate to, he really sort of liked us and was willing to take a chance on us. And I think we developed a fast friendship, and that was rooted in trust and honesty.
Because obviously you guys had performed at a high level. Like, obviously you guys had done a great job up until that point in the jobs that you'd had, or you're just not getting that job. You know what I mean? Like, you don't get those opportunities unless you'd excelled through the org up until that point.
We had, they put us in positions, and then it was up to us. It's like we kind of started this thing off with, the Pelion team. And we've always had this view that no single person wins championships. No single player wins a championship, but a team wins a championship. And so when these guys would put us into, and I think this is why Chris and I have been able to be business partners for so long, is one, we're enough different than we complement, but two, it's always about the group. We excel. It's an abundance mentality. Like Eric and Carl in particular had this abundance mentality, and they put us in situations to succeed.
How important is that your mentor had that?
Oh,
like I know for me, having Todd Peterson as my boss for 15 years is changed the course of my life, just to be able to have a front row seat at abundance.
I think it's the one of, if not the single most important qualities of a mentor, is when they think about, I remember Carl telling me, you know what, I'm as interested in your success as my own. Like he put us in situations for us to succeed that I look back now and just go, wow, that was crazy that he actually did that. So I think it's a super important.
It's so inspiring to me. Anytime, like, it was actually Jeff Curl. Jeff Curl came and spoke to, we were at Vivint. This was kind of like in the, we'd been with Blackstone 6 or 7 years. We were still just in it. And we had Jeff Curl come out and speak. And he gave this analogy, and he just said, hey, when you're a little kid, you really care what your parents think. And then you get to this stage when you're a teen, and then you care less what your parents think, and you care a lot what your peers think. He's like, but there's this stage when you're like a young professional. And he's like, and it's not your peers and it's not your parents, but if you have somebody that's independent of you, that's senior, that's a mentor, that believes in you more than you believe in yourself, he's like, you are blessed. And he talked about, his experience with Stephen Covey and, how that literally changed his life. Him believing in him when he's 21, 22, 23. And you just see that theme. And what you're describing is that theme. It's a senior person that you just really look up to that like believes in you. And you're just like, I will run through that wall to make sure that they were right. You know what I mean? Like you kind of care more about them being right than anything else,
It's so true. Some people have asked me, about my fears, and I'll describe like fear of failure, but it's not failure the way I think the traditional. It's I had somebody who believed me, like Carl, who believed in me, and I just didn't want to let him down.
Won't let him down.
And so it kind of was a motivating factor to just succeed and to find the next gear. And And then it kind of led us, like, I don't know about you, Chris, but had Carl not done that, I'm sure I'd probably be some mid-level guy working at some tech company. I wouldn't be.
It just changed the course of your life.
It 100% changed the course of my life, my kid's life, my wife's life.
Well, kind of Utah's. Like these ripple effects have,
Yeah.
I mean, this is fun 8.
8. Yeah.
Like this is like billions of dollars of equity into this ecosystem.
Yeah.
Which are jobs, which are found, like, it's just different. Like these small things aren't small things, you know?
Yeah. I think that's a super important thing. If I could go back, 30 years in my career, it's the ripple effects that have the biggest effect. We all know what it looks like to throw a rock in the pond and watch it ripple through, but little things in my life, and you can speak to it, I can pull that string through to go, oh my gosh, I can now see 20 years later how that had such an impact on me, on our organization, on the people at Pelion, on the community, all because, Carl decided and Eric decided, those two knuckleheads over there, let's give them a shot.
Well, I think the ripple, if you think about it as a ripple, mentors create mentors. That's a ripple. That's an echo.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if I know all of the reasons why Carl decided that we were worth the effort, and that he took great care in developing us and letting us fail, letting us learn that the worst possible scenario is not really that bad after all, and that you can pick yourself up and you can fix some things and you can find success. And we ended up being in a business that is just basically built on failure. The early stage investing is just a bizarre world. I mean, I've heard it said before, I didn't make this up, but imagine getting paid to be wrong 70% of the time. I mean, they're outside of baseball, there aren't very many games you can play where that's actually kind of the way that it is.
Yeah.
And so I think we do really relish this part of our career where, I mean, clearly, Blake's no spring chicken.
But I have a great haircut.
I mean,
You look good.
I obviously have lots of clear space in front of me, but we're at that point where I think the biggest joy that we have is being able to provide what was provided for us.
Yeah.
And to the term imposter syndrome, I don't think it existed back in our day, but I sure felt it.
Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah.
And never felt like I was good enough or that I could really be successful.
I think if there's any feedback that I get more consistent than any other thing from this podcast is that.
Yeah.
It's that everybody's scared that they're not enough, that they're faking it, that they are going to get found out. And I think like what's so refreshing for people is when they realize like their heroes felt this exact same way and move forward anyway. And I think that, is that there's this idea that had it all figured out. And even just you guys saying Eric didn't know what he was doing, but he took action. Yep. You know what I mean? Directionally, like the strategy was right. He may not have known the how to, but the what and the why. We got too much cash and there's a lot of great startups and we have access. The what and the why was there. The how to, he put you guys to go figure it out. And I think you look at like what's that's turned into, and I'm like, how many companies have you invested in? Like, have you calced that number?
Yeah. So it's going to be approaching probably about 400.
I was gonna say, it's gotta be.
If you roll back all the way to 96, we actually have 70 active companies today.
Today. Yeah.
And, we appreciate you having us on. Like we closed Fund 8 at $500 million, which is above the target of 400 on December 1st.
Which in today's market, like I'm in the world of fundraising. It's hard. Like the last 2 years have been a bear.
Oh,
and like you almost got the whipsaw of $6 trillion of stimulus. Like it was like, it got really easy.
Yeah.
And it turned off almost as fast as it turned on. And you guys, it's worse because at this point, so much of your capital is institutional.
Yeah.
And so they're like, you know, like
95% of our money is institution. You had 20, 21 that the markets were roaring. Like, I mean, companies got financed at lists like crazy valuations. Money was coming in from every place.
I think about like this Tiger Global type phenomenon and companies like that. It was almost
crazy.
It was like you're watching it and you're like, what is happening? Like there were some local companies that were getting $1 billion rounds with no revenue. And you're just like, what is going on right now? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like we had a front row seat because we had some of our companies that got financed by Tiger and the likes of them. And we're just like going, like, are we the dinosaurs? Are we out of touch? Or do we just not know what's going on out there? And then all of a sudden, January of 24, we launched Fund 8, and man, talk about a nuclear winter. You know, Chris and I hit the road. We were talking earlier. How many miles did we fly?
A lot.
4 million.
I think we spent 178 days in a hotel.
Which fires me up. Like when you guys were telling me that, like, because you're how old?
I'm 58.
You're 58 and you're
59.
Yeah, like
you could be my kid.
You know, like it fires me up because like I know what you guys have done with performance. I know about the Cloudflares and I know about the divvies and all these like, you know, big time successes. And like the time of like feed my family, you know, I got to go hustle to go feed my family passed a long time ago. Like it's been a while since, you know, the basic needs have had to get taken care of. And so there's the question that always drives me is like, where does that motivation come from to go grind, to go like when it gets hard to go do it? And so like when you guys are saying like we were on the road for 180 days and like we go raise $500 million in a venture fund in a tough fundraising environment. Like for me, just listening to them, like that fires me up. You know what I mean? Like you talk about like leading from the front. I'm just like, it gets me like, I love that stuff.
Well, and for every yes, there were 10 or 15 no's.
You were telling me about it.
Yeah,
you kind of got like your teeth kicked in to start. Like it was like,
yep.
Oh yeah. We looked at each other springtime, late winter, springtime, and we're like, I think we're going to raise $50 million. Like we're going to hit the big reset here. And it had nothing to do with Pelion or like anything else. It was just the retraction that was happening out there and people just going into pause mode. Like we're just going to hit pause.
We need to wait and see.
Yeah. Yeah. What's going to happen in Washington, D.C.? What are the markets going to do? Are the IPO windows? Like all of those questions got posed. And you know, and look, we had a couple of groups that like looked at us and said, no, we're going to move forward. And they kind of, the dominoes then started to tip over. And
how much of that has to do with just deep relationships? Because these same groups that push forward, it's not the first time you've worked with them. A lot of the time they've been through the cycles with you. Yeah.
We have investors that have been with us since 2000. And partnerships are about a relationship. Friendships are about a relationship. If it's a conditional relationship, it's short-lived. If it's an unconditional relationship, it's long-lasting. And you know, we had groups like Portfolio Advisors, Brian Murphy, who I think you've had Brian on this
Brian's
podcast.
Like Sandlot wouldn't exist without Brian Murphy. He was, you know,
Pelion
so helpful.
Yeah, Pelion wouldn't exist without Brian Murphy. You know, Brian took a chance on us in 2007. I'll never forget it. He said, Blake, we're friends. We're going to make a commitment to your fourth fund. And if you're successful, we'll be back for Fund 5. And if not, we'll still be friends. Like, I appreciated that.
Wow.
Now, we made him 10 times his money on his fourth fund, so I think he did okay. But yeah, like so there were people that just kind of like tipped over and said yes for it.
Yeah, that's really special.
Oh,
Yeah. I think we've always thought of this as the long game. And
Where do you get that perspective? Like, I'm always interested, like, how do you, because we were talking about this before, and this is a completely different subject, but like, you guys have been business partners for a lot of years now. Like, they're like 180 days, year 37 of being business partners. It's way different than 180 days, year 1 or year 2. Like, there is a honeymoon in some of these partnerships, and you guys see it in founding teams all the time. Like, so many of these companies blow up because of the wrong chemistry, the wrong founding team, the wrong original cap table. Like, how many companies have you guys seen implode? Not because of the idea or the product market fit, but just people issues. You know what I mean? Like, it's got to be a lot at this point.
yeah, I mean, I think we wring our hands more about that when we make an investment decision than we do the underlying technology or the market that they're going into. It just has a great deal to do with whether you're an investment firm or whether you're a startup. Finding people who you trust, and I always think Blake and I, it's one thing to see one another really early in the morning before you apply your makeup. But like, we've seen each other at our very worst, at our very best. Blake's seen me cry like a baby at the World War II Museum when I
in New Orleans
ran into a veteran of that war and ugly cried. Like, I don't know exactly what has to be true in order for relationships like this to persist. But for whatever reason, we've been able to be patient with one another.
But if you guys were to break it down, what would you say? Like, it's these 3 things, or it's these, what are like the core principles that you say, hey, this has to prove true for relationships to be long lasting, and specifically around you guys? Because obviously there's mutual like respect, and there's authenticity. You guys are very different people. Like, I know you guys independently from each other, and you're very different, which I think there's beauty in the differences. Like, if you're the same, one person's not needed. You know what I mean? So, like, valuing the differences. But what else would you say, like, this is why it works, or why it's worked for us?
criticism and knowing that it's coming from the other person from a place of love, not a place of I'm gonna find a reason to like put you down.
Yeah.
And Chris and I have had some really I'll call them great conversations, but they've been tough, hard, where we've like kind of called each other out. And the takeaway is, if you're going to be offended by somebody who's coming, you have to give them credit, and you have to believe they're coming from a place of love.
Yeah.
Because if you can't believe they're coming from a place of love, then it's just going to it'll deteriorate. And for me, that's what it's been. I know when Chris, walks in my office and said, dude, you got to stop acting like that. It's not because he's like a power play or nothing like that. He's coming in there because he genuinely cares about me.
Yeah.
And then the other component is, we do spend a lot of time on the road together, and we have a couple of rules. One is, you can always tap out, like go to dinner by yourself. Chris has gone to more movies by himself in Dubai.
Just go get a break.
We just take a break from each other. And like, no one gets to be offended.
Nah, it's cool.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I think we each have found over the years the thing that we bring to the partnership that is helpful, and that when people ask us about how we've been able to do raise fund over fund, and there's this just dogged persistence, that's Blake. That's not me. I hope there are other things that I bring to the table, but that is all Blake. I don't know if it came from the farm or, Blake famously says things like, You don't come in from the field until the work is done. And
that's actually a true statement. Quote Dave Modersitzki.
Yeah. And moving pipe. Blake's metaphor for working hard and doing hard things is moving pipe.
But what's wild about that, we always I'm just calling this out. The kids from Idaho were really good at door-to-door sales. Like there was a ethos of work that was just, I'm generalizing, but just we did really well with kids that came from that. Yeah, so that's interesting that you guys kind of call that one out. I want to shift gears. What's the darkest time that you guys experienced at Pelion? Like we're talking about a lot of the wins and the highlights, but like when was it tough to see daylight?
For me, it was COVID. But we had several things happen simultaneously. So a company that we had invested in back in 2009 went public in 2019, and we started to realize the upside of that investment at about the time that COVID hit. And I think if you're in this business, you're probably extroverted. Like the idea of working from home, especially for Blake, is just pure insanity. Yeah. It's just not going to happen. Blake stayed home for 27 minutes, and then he was working from the office illegally.
Yeah.
And the rest of us were pretty fast followers. But there was just a period of time there where we had several things happen at the same time. We had one of our key partners retire, but I think it's worth inspecting. One of the things that happened during this same period of time is that we made money.
Yeah,
and
so it was actually going really well from a financial standpoint.
Oh yeah,
yeah,
which was really internally confusing. It was to me. Like everything that you think you've been working for your whole life, the thing that you think is going to solve all of your problems and create sustained happiness, it was just a rude awakening that wasn't true at all. It didn't make all of my problems go away. It just exacerbated something.
Yeah, during that time, Chris, I was thinking about the same thing. And by the way, this was 2022.
Yeah.
So we can roll all the way back, but COVID hits, we scatter, the loneliness kicks in, and it's a self-imposed loneliness. Carl retires. By the way, Carl had been a CEO multiple times for a Sequoia Axel-backed company he took public. He ran around with the Bill Gateses of that era, and then he was gone. And I don't think I fully, at a personal level, appreciated
how much
I missed him.
Yeah,
and how hard that was on me. And then I just became what I'll call a complete bear to be around. My partners, my family. My wife used to just look at me and Sandy's like, you got to get your crap together. I was a little bit adrift. I was lost, which is weird because we'd had this multi-billion-dollar outcome.
It's so, because I haven't known you guys long. I've probably known you guys 5 years.
Yeah.
And from an outsider looking in, I'm like, these guys have it all. You're putting points on the board, some big points on the board. You know what I mean? Spiking the football. I think everybody's looking at you being like, man, what would it be like? And on the inside, it's fascinating to hear that was where there was some real soul searching and maybe even unhappiness, which is fascinating,
Yeah, I would say it was this journey that we all had to go on. I know for me, I had to go on a journey where it was I didn't realize what a security blanket Carl was, at least for me, but I think for both of us. Even though Carl, basically, we ran the firm. Carl was an owner in the firm with us, but
he was just always there though.
He was there. He also didn't want to be in charge. Like, he was more than happy just to say, you guys do that. And all
he had been there and done that.
Yeah.
All of a sudden there's that. And then it's like this, as weird as it is to say, this aspect of, at least for me personally, of loneliness. I felt like I was by myself. And my best friend, my business partner of 30 plus years, I got Chad and Ben, and like the list goes on of great partners who are, and I was just like, I had to go through this whole, and by the way, the money wasn't going to solve it. Like, I had to go through this soul searching of, I like, life had changed, and what we had been used to for 20 years was not what we were used to. And then you poured COVID over it, and we couldn't sit in each other's offices and hang out and talk. And
when it's probably exaggerated, because you do have 70 companies that are they're going through the same thing.
Oh yeah.
So it's not just lonely for you, it's lonely for them. You're talking to those founders, you know what I mean? And it was exaggerated in tech. Tech kind of led the charge of like, hey, we're going to go home forever and work from home forever. And you see that thing swinging so hard back now. I think I was just reading today in the Wall Street Journal. It's like, I think it was JP Morgan or something's like, you come to the office 5 days a week. Like, it's finally like back to like, no, we actually go to work when we say we're going to work. But there was a time where it was like,
it was
crazy.
Cold water thrown on in your face. Like, we went 9 months without getting on an airplane after having spent our entire careers moving around a lot and flying all over the place and spending half of our lives in Silicon Valley. And you just sort of get used to it, right? And then one day it just literally comes to a stop.
But there's something, even like, whether you're being productive or not, taking action feels good. It's like we're moving.
Yep.
We're like, this car is moving, and we're gonna, and so like, to be idle, I think like the idleness isn't good in anything.
It was terrible. I mean, Chris and I have spent, like, so when Chris and I travel, I'm a routine guy. Chris kind of mocks me because of that. But part of our routine is we go to the hotel gym and we get on a treadmill next to each other. We bang out 5 miles and we talk for an hour.
Yeah, you catch up.
And we talk about it, and that went away. Ben Lambert told me one day, he goes, Blake, I miss you and I sitting having dinner in California together. And so you take all of those little things,
touch points,
and you stack them together, and then you take them away. And it was a wacky time.
Yeah, I like airplanes, and I've always watched these shows about why planes crash, and it's always a cascading set of events. It's almost never a single thing.
Yeah,
it's multiple things cascading and happening simultaneously that creates that kind of turbulence that's very difficult to recover from. And I've decided that's sort of the experience that we had, that there were multiple things that happened at once. What was the most stunning thing to me was that one of them was the thing that you think is the panacea, the thing that makes everything okay. And just learned through experience that it doesn't make everything else okay. It's just a singular thing by itself, and it can be, hopefully we adapt to it and we learn how to be good stewards and to try and bless people around us. But
how do you guys get out of it? Like you're going through this cycle. When was it that you just worked your way out of it? Like, what were the steps that you said, we're getting back into these? One, when a lot of these, you got to hit rock bottom. So like, what was like hey, we're not dealing with this anymore. Like, we're stopping this. And then two, like, you've obviously made new hires. You brought on new people. Like the firm is different, like noticeably different. Even the last 12 months, there's a swagger, there's a youth, there's something happening with Pelion that just, there's nothing except cheering for you guys, but I can feel it.
Yeah.
I can feel it on I-15. I can feel it with founders that we meet with. And so like there was something that happened from 2022 until now. Like, what was it?
Well, for me, there were a couple of things. One was Chris sat me down and had a really heart-to-heart with me personally and said, dude, you got to get your crap together. Which I just ignored him and knew it was coming from a place of love, but just like, you don't know what you're talking about.
You weren't ready.
I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
My wife saying, you got to get your crap together. Then interestingly, it was my oldest daughter, McCall, who had, as we're kind of going into this whole COVID thing, and I leaned back on that. She came and temped for us one day as our front receptionist. And I said to her, so what did you think? She goes, oh, I hated it, Dad. I said, why? She goes, it's way too stressful here. I go, why? And she goes, because of you.
You just bring in like too much tension.
Yeah. And it's just, and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, look, I'm just grinding. But it was that, no, you're not. You're bringing something.
Bad energy.
Yeah. So you map those together, and then, I'm not much of a social media guy, but I'm scrolling one day, and you know how Facebook kind of pops up those memories for you?
Yeah. And
this memory collage of pictures of Chris and I and Carl traveling the world together. Like we fundraised, we did some fun things together. And I started going through that, and this emotion rolled back over top of me of how great we had it, how amazing it was. And I should celebrate that. I should honor my partner who wanted to retire, by the way. He's in his 70s. And the realization of, you know what, Blake, this is you, man. You're the one that's mad. This is not other people. And so for me, there was the rock bottom.
Wow.
And then I remember Chris's conversation with me. I remember my wife. I remember McCall.
You weren't even fully aware of it.
No.
You weren't even fully registering it.
No, I was like, it's everybody else. It's somebody else's fault. It's somebody else's fault. And then it was like all this stuff coming together, and then seeing these pictures. And like, I called Carl on the phone and I said, dude, I miss you, man. I love you. Like, and his answer was, well, when are you and Chris coming out? Let's go to a baseball game. And that was it.
It just got.
It's like it flushed in an instant. I don't know. That was me anyway. I mean, you had front row seat to that because you were the one that you started the conversation.
Well, as usual, you take on much more of it than is fair. These things are group efforts, right? Yeah. Whether it's unwinding or fixing yourself, it's like it takes everybody leaning into it and doing their part. I don't know. I think these things are necessary, and I think that when you look at any organization that has stood the test of time, they're nearly defined by overcoming hard things. And we never wish it on ourselves, do we? I never get down on my knees and pray for
sign up for it.
Horrible things to happen so that I can be refined. Yeah, I'm just not brave enough to do that.
What's fascinating though, like just you touching on that, is like you never wish it, but you kind of had to go there.
Yeah,
like Pelion had to go there to be where you're at right now. Like you guys coming out of your biggest fund you've ever raised on the back of probably as tough of a fundraising environment that you've experienced in the last 5 to 10 years. You kind of had to go there to gear up to say, hey, we actually love this. We actually love what we're doing. And it's not about the money. It's about like impact and legacy and making a difference. And
I think it kind of reset you and I from the standpoint of, I don't know about you, but this is the funnest I've ever had.
Wow. How cool is that?
Like, we rattled off a bunch of names, and I could rattle off a bunch. I walk into the office and I look around. I'm like, this is a cool group of people that are going to change the world. They're 100%. Doing some great stuff. And then you layer on top of that all these great entrepreneurs. I mean, we back the Blake Murrays of the world, the Brandon Rodmans. Like we can go down the list, and then there's this next generation of companies.
Coming up.
be it a NERSA or a LiveView or a Strider or a Neighbor, or like we can go down the list of these businesses. And I'm just like, wow, how fortunate, how lucky am I to get to like hang out with that
these are
group.
the names.
Yeah.
These are like the up and coming, these are the next Qualtrics and the next, podiums. And there's this next generation of Utah founders. And it's fun to like see legends being made, it's actually fun to watch.
And what's fun for Chris and I is we worked for the first generation. We worked for the WordPerfects, Alan Ashton, Bruce Braston, the Novels with Ray Norda, that kind of like we had that front row seat. We lived through this whole thing. Now all of a sudden we get to sit here and, we talk about, the 5 waves that have happened in the last, 20, 30 years. And we're just going into wave 5. We think that Fund 8 will be a catalyst of wave 5, but that's going to be this next group of companies.
But to have dry powder going into this cycle is so fun. Like, I just think between AI and the evolution of tech, coupled with just like the reps that you guys have had, I just think this is going to be like a fun ride. You know what I mean? Like,
we think so too. And we know that you can't time markets, but you can certainly recognize them when
the trends,
when they come. Those opportunities. And we saw that coming out of 2008 in the mortgage-backed security crisis. We've seen it time and time again. And there's something special about companies that come out of those periods of time.
Yeah.
Where there's just something unique about that experience where, compared to say the Tiger Global sort of era, not to put it all on them, right? That we were all culpable. But when there's too much capital and it's too easy, that's not generally when you see
the great return.
Beautiful things happen.
Yeah.
It's people who just reach down deep and find ways to get things done and to do it in a lean manner.
Yeah.
And those are the things that we end up telling stories about, isn't it?
So, you touched on this, but you saw the Ray Nordas and these legends. And then you've actually been through it with the Blake Murrays and, the Cloudflares and the Brandon Rodemans and kind of all these different companies. And now you have this new generation. Which founders succeed and which ones fail? Like, what are like the ingredients that you look for and say that there's, they're not all the same, but they have some similar traits?
Yeah. There's so many, but a part of it is they're just crazy like a fox. And, if you think about what we do as investors, we get to have a portfolio of 30 or 40 companies. So we get to de-risk.
Yeah.
What they're doing is they're pushing all in on one company. And so like they have to have this, take the hill mentality.
Yeah.
The other thing I find really interesting is the plus one, the husband, the wife, the partner, whoever.
That combo.
They're just as all in.
Yeah.
I think about Holly, Chris's wife, and Sandy, my wife. Pelion was not always a lay down hand. There was a time and place where, honestly, I called my wife on the phone. I said, honey, I think I got to go find a job. I think we're done. We're cooked. And like they were all in on what we were doing. And so those are some of the characteristics that matter is I'm just as curious about the qualities of the entrepreneur. Are they willing, are they willing to take the shot? Are they willing to set the screen? Are they willing to block out? Are they willing to rebound? And are they willing to stand on the sidelines and cheer their teammate on? If they can do that, like they can be pretty special.
Yeah.
But just important, the other half has got to be there.
But
with
there's
them.
a bit of a maniacal trait that's, they're not well-rounded for the most part. My experience, like, but you do have like this superpower, or like this one trait. And I was listening to Ben Horowitz talk about this, and they actually look for a bit of crazy or a bit of like just, you know, a superpower skill that maybe you have some defects, but they're looking to invest in strength. They're looking to invest in, you know, that take the hill or whatever it is. And I've noticed that. Like I've worked the Alex Dunns and the Todd Petersons. Like these guys were relentless. They were like, it felt like they never wavered when everybody was betting against them. And they kind of liked the us against the world. And I just, you know, I respect that. You know, when you look at these repeat founders, these David Neilmans and these guys who've done it through multiple cycles, there's a bit of crazy. Like there's...
You know, I remember Blake Murray, right in the heart of COVID, called Ben Lambert, who was on his board, and said, I need to come talk to you guys. It was May. And it was the end of May. And if the way that business worked is they basically loaned money out and then they would collect it at the end of every 30 days.
Yep.
COVID hits, the world shuts down. Divvy has $80 million out on credit cards. And Blake Murray calls and says, oh, we got to talk.
I don't know if it's coming back.
I don't know if any of this is coming back. And we meet in our conference room. I want to say it was like on a Saturday or something like that.
Peak COVID.
Yeah, peak COVID. We meet in our conference room and we're talking about it. And you could just see that Blake was going to will that thing he was going to figure it out.
I mean, I think about Blake and I see that. Yeah. I see a bit of crazy. Like in the most respectful way. Yeah. Like he has this will that I just admire. Like you see it and you're like, he's not going to fail. He will not fail.
And, you know, we navigated our way through that, roll forward, and we sold that company to Bill.com for $2.5 billion.
Yeah,
and that could have been a big fat goose egg.
But when he said people didn't show up.
No.
I remember talking to him in like prestigious firms that were in his deal that made commitments, didn't show up at the altar.
Yeah.
And he was taking notes, like he was keeping receipts, like, you know what I mean? Like you don't forget that stuff when you're like, hey, I need this person, and they just were nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
And you guys showed up, you know, and I think that was when I think about like why you guys have repeat business locally. And I think it's those type of legends, which are when people didn't show up and keep commitments. You guys have always just had that reputation of keeping your commitments. Like if you say something's going to happen, it happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. But let's remember, we all agree that we're wrong more than we're right. Yeah. So we actually have potential LPs ask, you know, we kind of keep a list of, you know, the world's dumbest questions that we get in our fundraising meetings. And people will authentically and genuinely say, you know, I can see your track record. You guys have done well. But you know, you've got your share of bad companies. Like, why do you keep investing in bad companies? And they're like genuinely serious.
Yeah. Dumbest question on the
planet.
planet.
Like, you know, I can honestly look you in the eye and say, we've never invested in a company that we thought was a crappy company.
Yeah.
It just so happens that this is hard.
Isn't that the most maddening thing? Because you're sitting down with that founder and you're like checking all the boxes, and then you cut a $5 million check, 10 million, whatever that number is. And then it goes to zero.
Yeah.
And you're like, I swear that was going to work. I like the idea, you know.
You know, quick little side story. So, one of my very first deals I did at Pelion was a company called Riverbed Technologies, bandwidth optimization. And we invested in this company, and our co-investors were Excel, Jim Schwartz, Chris Sheppy from Lightspeed. And I go out and I go to my very first board meeting. And I'm sitting there, and the VP of engineering stands up and he says to me, gives these little update. And then he says to me, and oh, by the way, we fired up our product and we caught the data centers on fire. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, what have I done? I just wrote the biggest check in the history of this firm, $4 million. And I invested into a company that their product causes data centers to burn down. And let's take a break, bio break. So I go in the bathroom and I throw up. And I'm like, oh,
Just sick.
just
Like,
sick to my stomach. Jim Schwartz walks in, sees what's going on, waits for me to wash my mouth out, puts his arm around me and says, we're going to be okay. And we went back in, and lo and behold, that company figured it out and went public. And that single company almost doubled our third fund. And so
and it could have gone either way.
Oh, I thought we were done. Like
I think of like some of these legendary companies. Take Apple.
Oh,
You're what, 2 to 3 months from bankruptcy?
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like really great people, some of the smartest people in the world.
Yeah.
Fired the founder. Everybody looking back now says Steve Jobs, one of the greatest entrepreneurs of all time. There was a point where the board said, that guy's a problem. Like, we got to get rid of him. Like, we can't control this like wild person, and it's like,
we had front row seat to that one. We watched that whole thing unfold because like we're in the heart of that, and we have the benefit of Eric and Carl and they oust Steve Jobs, and we're just like, wow, that dude is crazy.
But we humans, we crave certainty, and so Casey, you ask, okay, what is it? What is it that makes a special founder, and what are the ingredients, and what do you look for? And I'm not suggesting that we don't do that, and that we don't try and amass all of the institutional knowledge that comes in these businesses after years and years. But still, at the end of the day, you just don't get that. You don't have certainty. You don't know what you don't know.
You're trying to predict the future.
Yeah.
Like literally like what you guys do is try to predict the future.
Yeah,
and make bets.
And
crazy.
And there are things that you feel like you have some level of control over, and then of course all the things that you don't. But we can tell a million stories. I mean, we had one company that we really loved and felt like we had worked really hard on the thesis that we used to underwrite the investment. And the technologist, the genius that had written all of this code and conceived this product, called in sick one day because he had congestion, and he was dead a month later.
Yeah,
with a brain tumor. And that company was not able to overcome that, right? And they just shut their doors.
Too much of the strategy, like
yep.
That individual mattered that much.
Yeah. I was on the board of that company, and we shifted from survival of the company to how can we ensure this guy's wife can pay her mortgage, and they had a little family, little kids. Do we set up a college education? Like, I appreciate like where that company went from that perspective, but it was a big fat goose egg.
Which is so like, it's admirable, and it's also really hard.
Oh, so hard.
Doing the right thing, even when it's hard. Like, even when like you're winding the company down and still trying to do the right thing. And I think that's the thing that people miss. I remember going to a Tony Robbins event, and I went, like, Kevin Santiago got me to go, and I'm self-help junkie. So like anything that like helps me get a little better, but I didn't have like high expectations. It was kind of like, if I get a little better, that'd be awesome. And it was a 10 out of 10. It was like this like really incredible moment. But there was a point where he was talking about business, and he said, business is a spiritual game. And I was like, I've always known that. Like, I feel connected to God as much in business as I do anywhere else in the world. And it's because of it's what you're describing. You're thinking about his wife, and you're thinking about how she gets taken care of. And it's like, that's the soul to soul, person to person. And it's you throwing up in the bathroom and somebody coming in and saying, it's going to be okay. And it's like that service, and it's that caring and the consideration. It's these mentors that just believed in you, that you're like, there's something bigger. Like, I don't know how this all works, but it's a spiritual game. And I think that's like the magic that you guys, when I look at like 70 companies still going, $500 million fund to go help predominantly Utah businesses grow. There's just, you fast forward 20 years and there is no way to predict what that 500 million turns into, but it's not going to be insignificant. It's going to be something worth doing, like worth giving your life to. You know what I mean?
But at any given time, 25% of those companies are absolute tire fires.
Yeah.
You know, and then they're not.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's what keeps you coming back and keeps you invigorated and hopeful and all of those things. But you are constantly juggling success and failure simultaneously. And sometimes it feels like every ball you're juggling is on fire.
How do you manage that? Because I think like you, with 70 companies, the chances of like a major issue happening at any given time are like certain.
Yeah.
Like on a daily basis, there's going to be some major issue. How do you like keep a positive psychology and a clear head and an optimistic view when at all times there's some sort of crisis?
In my view, that's the role of a partnership. So you take your turn, but you have people around you who are supporting you and loving you through all of it. So we've just come to know this, right? And it's probably not that different from just life, you know, where you've constantly got things that you're trying to balance. And but if you've got partners who are there and who are rooting for you and willing to step in and willing to help,
Yeah.
like that's how you do it. I mean, my wife had a kidney transplant a few months ago, and you know that's a big deal, and it takes a lot of energy and time, but you know I had the luxury of having partners who felt that along with me and who helped carry the load and who made sure that I felt completely free to be able to dedicate my time and energy to where it needed to be. And that was at home with my wife. And, you know, I just, that means a great deal to me. And I know that's a rare commodity. And I've had bad jobs too. But, you know, if you can find yourself in a place where you're surrounded by good, like-minded people who love and care about each other, you can get through any number of tire fires. And you know that it's going to get better, and you know that it's not the end of the world, and that there are going to be plenty of successes to go along with the failures. And that's why we all get up every morning and do what we do.
Yeah.
And you know, we're at a point in our career where I mean the not well kept secret about both me and Blake is that we don't golf, we don't.
Although
Casey,
Casey, we'd like lessons.
I love.
We don't hunt. We don't we don't have very many hobbies.
I love to do.
We're working on that.
Like love it.
Yeah. But so, you know, on the one hand, sometimes I think, well, I just don't have anything better to do, and that's why I just keep doing it. But
like there's like business is really fun. Like if I could like go skiing or go like to work, I'd go to work. Like it's what a gift when you like wake up and you're like, I can't wait to go to work. You know what I mean? And that you guys have created that. You've created like, I think that's like when somebody says you've made it or you're living the dream. It's like when you would rather go to work than do all of these other things. That's when you know you're like in the sweet spot. You're in like this flow state of like,
you know, Sandy tells me I can't retire until I get a hobby, and so Chris reminds her that work is my hobby. But I enjoy what I do.
I think it's a beautiful hobby. Like you think about serving people, you think about mentoring people, you think about believing in people. I'm like, what's more fulfilling than that?
Well, and who's more inspiring than an entrepreneur?
Yeah,
you know. So we get to spend our days with these crazy committed, convicted people who are trying to build something worthwhile and special. Like that's a lot of energy, you know, to be around, to just be around people who are really trying to make a difference in the world. And it's hard to, that's probably part of what the whole COVID thing was, right? To go from that to
disconnect.
something that was
Disconnect from it. Yeah.
Yep.
I want to go to, I wouldn't know if you would call this Pelion 3.0 or 4.0, but Pelion 2024. Talk to me about the team. Talk to me about like the vision and like where it's going. Because I think somebody would look at it and say, Fund 8, you guys got a lot of miles under your tires, but there's energy today that I think both you guys would say, I don't know if we've had this type of energy in a long time, like excitement and momentum.
Well, I think one of the things that we've done right is, and I mean this, that we genuinely value and love our younger partners. Like they bring an energy and even a set of experiences.
Which are who?
Well, we have Daler and Allie,
Jack
and Jack,
Christy, and
yeah,
Skylar, and the crew.
Yeah, and
so you guys
Tyler and
you guys have a pretty deep
Sterling
bench right now.
And yeah, and they are. I mean, like while on the one hand, it is fun and rewarding to be a mentor, even just sort of by default because we're old and Gandalfy. But I also get mentored every day by these young people who just, I don't know even sometimes how it is true, but they know things that I don't. They have a level of understanding I don't.
I think there's some magic about like staying young. Like I remember seeing Todd, and Todd just stayed young.
He's still young.
The reason he stayed young was because he was just with young people all day, every day. And so there was just this like, you know what I mean? Like, and so you guys having that in your org, I think it matters. I think not having those fresh ideas and not having those new takes and even like 2024 operational experience, like the game changes so fast now. The half-life in knowledge is so like that turn is so fast at this point, especially with AI and all these things are changing. I go back and do these executive courses at Harvard, and they get up this last year and they say, hey, you can't use ChatGPT on the case studies. And there was almost a laugh in the room. Everybody's like, everybody's using that. Like that genie is so far out of the bottle. Like you're just never putting it back. And that's what is happening. Like everybody's using it every day. And you're in the early innings. You know what I mean? And so like, if you're not like staying relevant and staying current and have your finger on that pulse, you're going to be a dinosaur before you know it,
Yeah. When whatever it's 3.0 or the next iteration, what I think is kind of fun through all of this is one, what's happening in Utah around AI and cyber, and like the innovation that's happened here is amazing. We made an investment into some new office space, and the level of energy
is just
and
legendary, by the way. It's like I walked in there and I'm like, how inspiring is this space? Like I was re-listening to Steve Schwartzman's biography, and he was talking about how important office space has always been to him and to Blackstone. And it's like, you just want to be in a space that inspires you. If you're going to spend your life going to and you've built this like inspiring space where founders that go in it, employees that go in it, like you can't not be inspired in it, which is so cool.
It's like, and that's where like our younger colleagues, their fingerprints are all over that space. The vision was let's create something where founders can build.
Yeah.
Where companies can get created, where the world can get dented because of what's going to get created. Like if we can do that and be open and inviting. So there's that component. And, this new fund that we're bringing online, we've started to deploy capital out of that. And, we sometimes have to stop and pinch ourselves because Chris and I remember when raising $100 million.
So hard.
Like, and it would take us which fund? The fourth fund? It took us almost 2 years to raise
$100 million,
$120 million. And so we have this like, almost this like pent up enthusiasm and anxiety that clash with each other every time we got to go raise a new fund. And now suddenly we're sitting on $500 million and we're looking at each other like, how did that happen?
In Utah.
And then you look at what's going on here from an innovation standpoint.
It fires me up.
And
you guys are going to make an absolute dent in the world. Like, you really are. Like, I think you're like, Utah's never been more entrepreneurial than today. Like, there's just an ecosystem in the universities. There's like, you have people that have seen it at a lot of these great companies that now they're saying it's my turn and they're starting up companies. There's a lot of seed money. I just think you guys are going to smash, which gets me so excited for Utah.
Well, and it's on a global stage. I mean, we have investors in the Middle East and Dubai and Kuwait and Bahrain.
So talk to me about that, because I think that is fascinating. You talked about early stages in your career.
Yeah.
Where Utah was kind of a liability.
Uh-huh.
And that's not that way anymore.
No.
So like, talk about that just real quick.
Yeah. So back in 2012, we had a guy named Craig Nichols, who was an investor, chief investment officer at an endowment in St. Louis, that got recruited to ADIA, the Abu Dhabi Investment Authority. And he had a thesis around Utah's going to be pretty amazing. And so he invited us to come over there and got his team excited about. And so they underwrote in 2012. Think about that.
Early.
Sovereign Wealth Fund in Abu Dhabi underwrites a little tiny firm in Salt Lake City because of the vision of what this place can become. I don't know about you, Chris, but I don't think I fully appreciated what Utah could become.
Then, yeah.
But we got off the plane and said, holy crap, that's a long flight.
Yeah.
Maybe there are others over here, that'll make this trip a little more worthwhile. Yeah. And we were just smart enough to have that idea and to market our fund over there. And, over a period of many years, we've accumulated a significant number of really great
partners,
supportive partners.
Yeah.
And it's a different part of the world, and which makes our lives just more rich. It's fun to go to these different places and to experience different cultures, and to be able to do it as part of your job, not just as like a vacation.
And and then like this fundraise, we decided we'd spend some time in Asia. And so we go meet with, I want to say it was a family office or a sovereign fund in Singapore. And we walk in, we sit down, and they hand out an article about all the great things happening in Utah for us to read. We didn't give it to them. They had done that research. And so, it's just a great reminder of, it doesn't matter if it's Dubai or Singapore or Draper, people are recognizing what's going on in Utah. Yeah. And that's part of this whole excitement. And, quite frankly, when I look at the team and that we have on the field right now, they're just out there just hustling.
They're like finger is to the floor.
Yeah.
Like they're absolutely like the pulse of like the who's who and like where they need to be going spending their time, which is, that's been the change that I've noticed over the last 2 or 3 years. Is it feels like you guys have got younger and you've absolutely got close to the pulse of like everything that's happened in Utah. And I think that coupled with $500 million of capital, it's going to be a fun ride.
There's nothing better than to start 5 freshmen on your basketball team and win a national championship.
For sure.
Chris and I are not the freshmen, but we got a bunch of great freshmen.
You got to have great coaches. You have to have like great senior leadership. And I think you call that out on how important that was for a long time in your, like Pelion probably wouldn't exist without your original partner.
Yeah.
Just kind of being there for you and letting you guys be the young guys that go like, you've just been that person. You've been these young partners before. And you know how like that drive and that youth and that even ignorance sometimes, dumb questions actually are really great sometimes, because like when somebody just calls something out that should be obvious to everybody else, sometimes that's actually the thing that you should be talking about. You know what I mean? So it's nice to just have,
one of the coolest things that we just had happen to us is, our colleagues here, Chris and I talk about Carl stories. By the way, Carl's like one of the most interesting men individuals on the planet. And about our situation, Daler Youngblood walks into our office and he says, I hear you guys talk about Carl as your mentor. Do you think Carl would mentor me? And
how special is that?
That led to 3 or 4 of our colleagues that they got in touch with Carl. And Carl's done this. I mean, with us, it was he's with us every day. He's helped some of our CEOs, what have you. And so Carl put on this master's class for 3 or 4 of our colleagues.
Yeah, they meet every quarter, and it's basically an extended seminar on leadership and leadership principles. And
so I like self-inviting myself.
Yeah.
I actually would love.
Oh my gosh.
What's really interesting about it is I know you, Casey, and so I know that you're like a forever student and you consume a lot of information, books, and so on. And one of the things that was always interesting about Carl, as well read as he is, and he's memorized every work of Shakespeare and the Old Testament. He's a truly weird guy. He doesn't really subscribe to the self-improvement sort of books. He believes in biography. He believes in learning leadership from leaders.
Yeah.
And so we were always reading about Alexander Hamilton or
Shackelford. Endurance was his big.
Yeah.
How good is
Shackleton.
That?
And so he has developed a curriculum that he's now bestowing upon our younger partners. And telling these stories and teaching principles about leadership.
My gosh.
Real world stories.
Can I ask you guys, you need to record that stuff.
Yeah.
You got to get a camera in there and you got to record it. There'll come a day where you'll be happy that you recorded it. Because I think that's the gold in life.
Well, when you came back to that dark period in time, we're now talking about that. Where we just had Carl help us do diligence on a super interesting company that has technology that lives in the quantum spectrum. It's really deep tech. And we were able to call it. So Carl his role with us is very different.
But he's still there.
Yeah. And for me anyway, I had to reconcile the joy that I had and the continued joy, but it looks different.
We did 3 deals kind of the back half of the year. And Todd Peterson co-invested with me. And it's so fun to have one of your heroes.
Yeah.
Just be along for the journey. And I hear you guys talk about Carl. You know what I mean? And it's that. It's you got one of your heroes and, big brother and partner and to have him still be a part of it, is so special. And it's really, when I think about culture, that's what binds it to the core is when these young people are tying it from you think about Native American tribes and all this stuff. And it was the elders that taught the, you know what I mean? That taught the culture to the youth, and somehow you guys are tying it together. I don't think you guys realize how special this is. You guys need to record this stuff.
Well, and I think that things change, and one of the things I've just read recently that many believe that the first person to live to age 150 is living today. So we need to reframe the notions we have around retirement,
longevity.
And,
for sure.
What do you do when you're 70? I don't know. Look, maybe we should work until we're 100. I don't know, but I do know that there are plenty of things that we can do as we enter that chapter of our lives to continue to contribute, to not just rocking chair the rest of our life away on a porch, unless that's what you want to do.
But how sad is that? I think about that and I'm that sounds like hell to me.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like a good time. That sounds like hell. That sounds like just dying faster. For me, the idea of working, my grandma is this amazing example to me of, she died when she's 95, 96. but she's like playing the piano, learning the piano in her 80s. She's got her scriptures, and they're marked up next to her bed when she passes. And like this, like she's got rental properties that she's out. And I'm like, there's some magic in like progressing. You know what I mean? Like that. And I think longevity is going to change everything. And I think there'll be a time when you guys look back and say 60 was young.
Yeah.
60 wasn't old. 60 was actually like kind of getting started. And so there's some paradigms that I think need to be rethought. And also like even just this idea of retirement, I think it's trash. I think it's like I don't think you're doing anybody a good service of telling them, hey, go off
right
and die, or like give less of yourself to society. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't serve anybody. 2 questions and then we'll finish up. This is kind of a theme of the podcast, and it's always intriguing to me. Talk to me about faith. Talk to me about faith and how that's influenced your journey.
You know, having just raised this last fund, there were times along the way where my younger partners would pull me aside and say, "Do you think we're going to get this fundraised?" And I would just look at them like they had 3 heads. And I would say, well, of course we're going to raise the fund. Like, what's the alternative? What's the option to that? And I think part of that is rooted in faith, a belief in yourself, a belief in your team, and this belief, this underlying faith that you can do anything that you set your mind to. And that can be a faith in a higher power. It can be a faith in, different things. But I think that nearly everything we do every day is in some way connected to the idea of faith. I really believe that.
Yeah, faith has been core to me. My grandfather immigrated from Poland in 1927, and when World War II broke out, he was headed to a concentration camp here in the U.S. And through a stroke of a variety of lucks, which is a lot longer story than we have time for, he met my grandma, but faith in God was always part of. He was an altar boy for the Lutheran Church when he grew up, and my grandma was a member of the LDS faith. And so through that journey, we always had this core belief that, God is important, and the faith component of this. And so I've always kept that. There's been times in my life where I probably need to be more faithful. There's times in my life where I rely a lot more heavily. And, the great reminder from a wonderful wife and just fantastic children is, we are put on this earth, I believe, to to manifest goodness, and we're blessed so immensely that how we move forward and how we think about that. I think it's just a great reminder, and it works for me anyway, that faith is an important component of who I am.
The follow on to this, both of you guys give like very generously. And I've got mentors in my life that, are 5, 10, 20 years in front of me that I just, that inspire us to give. And you guys have been that for me. And talk to me a little bit about giving and how that fits in your philosophy of just life. Like big donation to Primary Children's, big contributors to local universities, all sorts of causes in between. I know your daughter's very active. She's worked with my wife on some things, but talk to me about giving, because that's a piece of Pelion that just feels like it's just the same, like Pelion and giving back. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, Well, I'll highlight my wife as kind of the tip of the spear there, and my 3 daughters. And we made a decision a while ago where the decision was we're going to give. And by the way, our financial situation was very different when we made that decision than what it is today. And it didn't matter the dollar amount; it mattered the repetition, the exercise, the mentality of giving. And, we kind of have 3 things that our family has decided are kind of what I'll classify as a little bit of our North Star. And giving is one of the 3 pillars of the North Star. And it's interesting because one of the pillars is be good stewards of the money, grow that money, because then you can give more away.
Yeah.
There's an aspect of it where we want to be philanthropic and generous. And we do that not for anything other than a responsibility, a desire, a mentality of we want to make sure that the next generation is in a better spot than we're in. When we did Primary Children's, we had a niece 35 years ago that died of brain cancer, but she was treated at Primary Children's. So it's near and dear. None of our children today, but there are a lot of other people who maybe my grandchild, maybe somebody is going to need that. And so like all of that comes into play. And so what I'd say is the giving component, it doesn't matter if it's $10 or $10 million. It's how you want to think about giving, and you should stretch.
Yeah.
You should challenge yourself and stretch. And we do it because, gosh, coming back to faith, we've been blessed beyond measures.
Is it a stewardship thing? Is it kind of just a feeling of like, hey, like I've been given some gifts and I need to, like, I'm going to be accountable? Like, is that like a core part of it?
It's accountability, it's stewardship, it's helping, and look, there's a lot of great people out there, it's funny. My friend Brian Murphy is another wonderful example of giving.
Yeah, for sure.
Todd, oh my gosh, talk about a guy who kind of leads out on the giving component. And so that's how we think about it. And it's funny, our kids have always said, well, Dad, we're not in the same situation as you and Mom. And so we've taken an approach where when we give, it doesn't matter where the money's coming from within the family.
It's the family gift.
It's a family gift.
Yeah.
And that's why you'll always see our kids heavily involved in the giving component, because there's a day when they'll be sitting out there on the leadership role. So Chris, you might have some different views.
Well, you and Chelsea B are heroes,
crushing it.
I mean, you're awfully gracious to say that we're leading the way. I think you guys are leading the way. It's such a complicated thing, isn't it? I mean, on the one hand, many of us have grown up with the understanding that money is the root of all evil, and that it's a trap, and that it's a perilous kind of path. And I think it is those things in many respects. And it's just it's humbling to be in a position where you're able to do something good, where you're able to fulfill a stewardship that is rooted in faith.
Yeah.
And also, I've just been to too many funerals. Not only can you not take it with you, but nobody cares.
Yeah.
Right. Like the things that you can buy with money, and it's just you realize in short order that that's just an empty hole. It's not gratifying. And, but it is something that just you like, it takes time, and you have to learn, how to do it and how to do it effectively, and make sure that it's getting to the people that you intend for it to get to. And it's harder than you think. and it requires a lot of education and learning. But the great thing is just we live in a community where people have set a great example for us, and whether it's Todd and Giving Till It Hurts, and Alan Ashton, who was
didn't even think about that.
Word Perfect, and you just look at the people who have set such a great example, and then learning that money can only buy so much and do so much, and I've just learned over time that the thing that is really satisfying and gratifying is to do something meaningful, but I think that's another thing that makes Utah a special place. There's just that spirit here.
And one of the things I think with giving is Sandy and I first started down this journey where everything we were going to do was going to be anonymous.
Yeah.
That's how we were going to think about the world. And I was having a conversation with Gail Miller, who's just an amazing individual. And it was around Primary and Children's. And part of our decision with Primary and Children's was because Gail was involved.
Yep.
And so I'm telling her this, and I'm telling her we want to make it anonymous. And she said, Larry and I, years ago, wanted to do everything anonymous. And then I had one of our neighbors say, hey, we heard you guys made a donation too. And so we made a donation as well. And she said, so we've reframed how we think about stuff. We're not doing it to put the Miller name on a building.
Yeah.
We're not doing it to put the Modersitzki name on a building. But if it inspires somebody, just like Gail inspired us.
But it absolutely does. And I think it's like important that you bring that out, because I think there is like some cultural and even religious kind of conflict where you say like, hey, do I want to like go put it out there? And I think the answer is like, you need to. So what as an observer, when I see the Millers lead, and when I see the Modersitzkis lead, and the Murphys lead, and the Petersons lead, it inspires me to contribute. And that was one of the things we just did a donation to UVU, and it was Astrid coming to us and saying, we got to go raise like 40 or 50 million. And we need it's like raising a fund.
Yeah.
It's like once you get an anchor, then you play off that anchor and you say, these guys are in and these guys are in, and you get that momentum. And like, so there's a part of it that's like, somebody's got to signal, I'm moving in this direction to get everybody else to follow. And so I do think there's like tremendous value, whether you're the Eccles or whether you're the Rockefellers or whether you're the Petersons or the Millers, to signal like this matters. And we need all of us, everybody come with us. You know what I mean?
Well, Gail, we've been partners with the Eccles family for 20 plus years. So Spence Eccles, I remember sitting with them and having them say, we're at a stage in our life whereby there needs to be, who's going to pick up the baton and carry it forward? They're still doing their thing, but who's
that next generation?
Who's the next generation? Yeah. And where's the baton going to go? And it's families like the Baws and the Petersons and the Coopers and the like that. And then the question that we put out there is, okay, so who's the who's also joining that generation?
Yeah.
And I just think there's been so many tremendous examples with those great families, the Millers and the Eccles and the Huntsmans and the Sorens. So like we can go down the list of that have inspired us to do it the way we do it. But that was really hard to make that decision on. We're not going to be anonymous, and I'll always be grateful for that conversation with Gail. I'm not sure Gail really knew the impact she left, but it was meaningful.
You think about their legacy, and it's like it grows by the year. But I don't know if there's anybody in Utah that the Millers haven't touched.
So true.
Whether it's selling a car, whether it's a theater, whether it's primary chill, like I don't know if there's any person in the state that they haven't touched. It's really special when you think about like what decisions. So I'm going to end with this. I don't think you guys realize how impactful you've been on my personal life. So I'm going to give a couple data points. You hired my business partner, Dave Jensen, as an intern.
Love Dave.
When he had no business being an intern. Didn't have finance experience. had gone and played pro baseball, and for you guys to like give him an experience in finance, it allowed him, which is a tough door to crack. And that legacy of interns at Pelion has been something that you guys have done so well. And I think you've opened the door for so many people to have incredible careers. But I wouldn't be in the business I'm in without that. So that's the first one. Dave comes back and has an opportunity to invest in David Neilman's airline. He calls Chad Packard. Chad Packard coaches him on how to put together the first SPV. Like literally holds his hand.
Love Chad.
And we're $700 or $800 million later. And that would not have happened if you have a Chad Packard literally holding Dave's hand.
Who was also an intern.
Who was also an intern.
Do this, do this, do this. And then the last one, you guys invited us to come partner with you on the Series D of Divvy. I think you guys are exceptional. Very proud to be an investor in your funds. Every time you guys win, I'm just cheering for you, both kind of on the personal and the professional. And I just can't wait to, see what this capital turns into. I know it's going to be something really special, and I know this is going to be a big part of your legacy. And, anything that we can ever do to help, we're a yes before you even ask. We admire you guys so much. So thanks for coming in.